Hi, welcome everyone. I just want to take a moment of silence for all of us and for me to become an empty vessel for higher power to flow through. I've gotten to be very emotional. I didn't used to be. I learned to protect my feelings because it wasn't safe. Looking back, and this program has helped me look back, and I'm just briefly going to talk about how I qualified to be here. That Growing up at 12 years old on the East Coast outside of Philadelphia, I grew up in a upper middle class family. But at 12 years old, I was coming into my own as a male with all this testosterone flowing, uh, and not knowing what to do with all the emotions. So I'm sure I expressed some anger. And my parents, they didn't know what to do. So I got locked in a basement. It wasn't, it was over weekends. It wasn't every week, but it went on from the age of 12 to about 15 when I stopped it. Um, but I thought that was normal. I thought everybody got punished in that way if they were so-called out of control. But later I discovered that was trauma. And for me as a male, it was almost like a triple, what do they call it? A perfect storm. Because around 12 or 13, when I was in Boy Scouts, I got molested. And I minimized that because there wasn't penetration. And I thought everybody goes through that. At the same time, I was hitchhiking around town because it was a lot safer back then, but I was getting picked up by lots of homosexuals, propositioning me, and always had my hand on the door handle, never knowing if I had to jump out if it became too unsafe. So started questioning my gender identity as well. And then I can't even remember. On top of that, yeah, my parents didn't know how to set boundaries, but I needed boundaries. Um, and I took over the house, I'm ashamed to say, but I took over the house at 15 and locked my mother out of the house if she misbehaved and would let her back in when I thought it was appropriate. And I expected when my father would come home that he would discipline me physically, emotionally, something, but he didn't know what to do except threaten military school to me. So I took a train downtown and I hung out at a square in the center of Philadelphia and joined gangs and found that I got immediate gratification. I wanted and needed attention and I wasn't getting it. I felt ignored, but as a child, I needed attention. So in the gangs, if I did something right, I got immediate gratification, pats on the back, affirmations. If I did something wrong, I get beat down. And it was pretty much for me black or white. I found drugs also shortly thereafter, but also I discovered at 12 years old, and it's important for me to discuss this. I hope I don't trigger anybody, but I want to give a male perspective here that I discovered masturbation at 12 also. So the combination of being locked in that darkness in the basement and learning masturbation, I found through what was then pornography of magazines and things like that, I could escape with the illusion that it was safe for me to go there and hide, that I was in control of my own emotions, of myself. Little did I know that it was a bottomless pit I got into that I've been involved in for 60 years of my life. I'm trying to learn. I believe masturbation is healthy in the human being. So I'm trying to learn healthy masturbation. I compare it with people that are overeaters that need to eat for survival, but where's the fine line of what is my intention when I eat? Same thing with my masturbation. What is my intention? Is it to be whole and in and of myself? Or is it to release anxiety that I don't know how to get out of me otherwise? Is it to go into fantasy because being in the present is too scary? These are things I can talk about openly and honestly now. I learned to cry. The first thing I did when I got sober back in 1993, I was sitting with my children in a rainforest in paradise with a 357 in my lap, ready to eat a bullet, because I only knew as an addict extremes, black or white. Now in recovery, I understand gray. Most of life is in the gray for me. So the first thing I did when I got sober, I chose life. And the first thing I did when I got sober was to pray to learn how to cry and feel my true feelings. As a man, I was taught to be happy, mad, sad, or glad. Anything else, I was a number of names that I don't want to say. And I've been given that gift. Today in this meeting, I'm blessed. I'm blessed because my wife is in this meeting today. And my daughter, my oldest daughter, is in this meeting today. I got introduced to ACA through my daughter asking me to come. She said I didn't ask her, she didn't introduce me as her qualifier, but I was. I was one of two qualifiers for her that generationally gave her dysfunction. And now I take it as my responsibility to be accountable for my dysfunction and to go into the darkness. And let me share this really quick. And this is part of my experience, strength, and hope of being in meetings for several decades now. That if you were to go into my mind, I picture a two-story house, and I go up the stairs, and there's a long hallway. And at the end of that hallway is a door with 5 padlocks on it. And those were my demons that I locked away, that I thought I would never have to look at in this life. But early in recovery, I opened that door, and it felt like deep, dark blackness that had a consistency, a thickness to it in that blackness. And I just trusting in these programs, in these 12-step rooms, I blindly reached in and grabbed one of those demons around the throat and drug it out. And the amazing thing is, when I brought it into the light, it was nothing more than a skeleton that crumbled into dust. So I took out all my demons and I emptied that room. That's how I talk today, that I can talk in strength about masturbation and not be embarrassed, that I don't have to worry what others think of me because I'm only accountable to me and my higher power. I came into this world alone, I'll go out of this world alone. And I don't say that the way other men I've heard boast. I'll go into this world alone, fuck everybody else, all that bullshit. I don't go into that. I go into that I came into this world and now I'm looking for my purpose. And that's to pass along the strengths that I've learned in these rooms. We are warriors in these rooms. I don't care what kind of pain you are coming from or that I came from. What if this wasn't evil and bad? What if those are human judgments? What if those are my challenges? Because when I think something is good, I want to embrace it and lock it down and put a chokehold on it for my codependency. But what if it isn't necessarily good or bad? That's my judgment. And out of 30 years in these programs, the most important saying to me is, my mind is a dangerous place. Don't go in there alone. I've got to take my higher power and true best friends that'll hold me accountable, just as if I'm going to be their best friend. I'm going to hold them accountable out of love. I'm not going to mask things or keep curtains over certain things. I don't want that. The way I learned that was my first divorce, when my family members and people around me came to me and said, "Oh, we knew that wasn't going to work." And I thought and felt, well, why the fuck didn't you tell me that as a true friend or as a family member? And I felt totally betrayed and lost trust in people. And I moved out to Lancaster among the Amish in a farm and lived by myself out there with 6 cats, trying to learn how to feel emotions. And those were the only things I could trust at the time. Um, since then, I've worked with Native Americans. I've worked in prisons. I've done felonies, and I never got caught. And it wasn't because I was so fast or smart. It was, I believe, so that I could get the clearances to work in those prisons. And I've worked with murderers, rapists, child molesters, and there go I in the wrong circumstances. And what I learned with them when they opened up enough that I could go to the bottom of their pain with them, was they had their illusion of power and control taken from them. And they were taking it from others, thinking that they could get it back and never could. They gave me a lot of gifts through their pain. I've got PTSD from their pain of going there with them, having to hear all the rapes, molestations, crimes that they committed on others. There's nightmares that I live with every day. But that's my purpose. I found my purpose because there go I in the wrong circumstances. So I try and take from all of them. I work around a lot of death and suicide as well. And having that understanding, not just the book knowledge, but the street knowledge, I appreciate being in the moment because I don't know how many more moments I have. I've seen gangbangers with their bodyguards all around them get hit by a little old lady as they're crossing a street, no matter how many guns and bullets and whatever else they had around them. I've learned to embrace my death as my best friend, as part of my life. Carlos Castaneda years ago wrote a book, The Teachings of Don Juan, where, if I paraphrase what he said, basically is, if I'm driving my car through life, down the street of life, and I take my death as my best friend next to me, I can appreciate life while I have it. For me, I feared it. I feared life. I feared death so much that I would challenge it on motorcycles at 2 o'clock in the morning, high on dope, going down streets, racing Corvettes and things, and just challenging it, going into drug deals. I was more comfortable with the drug deal going bad and being in the room with that than I was with my own children who needed me, and I didn't know how to be there for them. And at 8 months sober, living in Hawaii, I turned to my children, who were 2 and 6 at the time, and said to them, and they weren't, I knew they wouldn't understand it, but Dad's got to find who he is before he knows how to be a dad. So I prepared and moved over to Arizona 29 years ago. And I know my children felt abandoned and betrayed, and I couldn't change that. I said to their mom that, you know what, we're together because we need to be together, not because we want to be together. And it was recommended in the other 12-step program not to make too many changes your first year of recovery because you're going to go through so many personal changes yourself. Well, they also say it's an individual program. And I separated from my wife then at 3 months sober. At around 5 months sober, I sold my business. We sold the house at around 8 months sober. And then I moved to Arizona, knowing nobody, just wanting to test out this program and see what it really was in my life. Because I've seen some people take these rooms and hide in these rooms and use them as a shield from living life on life's terms. Whereas I take what I learn in these rooms and try them out in life. And if it's bullshit, then I throw it away. But I found it to be my truths. So I do go out and challenge these things. A while ago, my wife asked me if I wanted to do a motorcycle ride from North Vietnam to South Vietnam. Well, when I saw the price, I said, fuck that, excuse the language. Um, but then I challenged myself because I am older. I'm in my early 70s, and I went through the Vietnam War era and saw guys, some guys didn't come back and some guys came back really messed up. And I thought, I can't go and be with those people. But then I prayed about it and thought about, well, I couldn't be among sober people. And I am. So I asked her, what if we take this to the extreme, which is still what I tend to do, but I try and do it in healthier ways. And I said, let's move one way to Vietnam and let's really challenge this life and walk into the unknown. And she was strong enough that she said, yeah, let's do it. And we sold everything except what fit into a 10 by 10 storage area. And we went to Vietnam and we were there 10 months. And we went diving. And the reason I bring up diving is because scuba diving for me is going into the unknown. And one of my greatest fears that I saw in Hawaii was sitting at a restaurant that had a little pier going out over the ocean. And I saw flashlights in the ocean. And I said, what are they doing? They're night fishing underwater with snorkels. I go, oh my God, they're in the black darkness and they're spearfishing, drawing blood. What about sharks? And I thought about that. And I thought, wow. So I decided to apply that to my recovery. And I went on a night dive with some friends. We went a mile out from the island down a 200-foot sea cliff and went about 60 feet down. And I was scared as shitless. So I began spinning around like a gyroscope, spinning around so much that I threw up underwater, chumming for the sharks. Thought, now Jaws is definitely going to get me, but it didn't. And that's when I started to believe more in my higher power concept. And that's when I started realizing sobriety for me was like going into the unknown, into that blackness of the ocean at nighttime, which, if anybody goes there, is very peaceful at night. Yes, the sharks are hunting at night, but there's also a whole different element of fish that come out at night. And it's so peaceful down there that it's a form of meditation for me, even though I fear for my life. But what is life? Do I give my power, as the Native Americans over here have taught me? Am I going to feed the good wolf today, or am I going to feed the bad wolf today? That's up to me. Today, I choose to feed the good wolf. I choose to be with the winners. I don't care who is in this room, just by being on this Zoom meeting, you are a warrior. There's millions of us as human beings that are running in fear that don't have the guts to come into these rooms and may never. That will continue our generational trauma indefinitely. And we are choosing to grasp it, the pain of it. I remember hearing pain is part of growth, misery is an option. And I thought I didn't do it right because there were some times I did grow and didn't feel pain. But I do find that the pain is temporary. And if I put it on a scale of how much pain that I've held by running from things and how much energy I've given to the negative and running from things versus going through a brief amount of pain, but walking through it, getting a stronger character. My mother's 97 and she's dying soon. She's been on her deathbed 3 times already. And I wanted to go back to that house. I've done in other programs, I've gone to that basement and sat in that basement with my inner child. This time I went back about 4 weeks ago, I guess, setting boundaries with my mother that if she was too uncomfortable to talk to, that I had a hotel I could go to, but I wanted to stay in the house. And I stayed in my old room that I went to once I was 15. I moved out from my brother's room, my younger brother's room, into my own room. And I slept there. And I went down to that basement the first day and I asked one of her nurses to come down there with me and take pictures of me holding on to myself, embracing my inner child. And I have those pictures. I didn't have to go back there the rest of the time I was there because I've healed that part of me. I'm no longer stuck in that basement. I'm able to get down in that basement through some of the therapy recommended here. I've done my EMDR and I've embraced that part. I'm now getting into, I went to my therapist the week before I went to go see my mother, and a week after I saw my therapist. And I also saw my youngest brother who was diagnosed with cancer. And the strange thing was, higher power had me reach out to him. I had really harmed him in younger years, where he was 10 years younger than me, and I had him dealing drugs for me in high school. And I used to pit him against my parents in efforts of power and control, where my parents would tell him to do one thing, I'd tell him to do another, and he listened to me. Well, years later, he went to therapy, and my other brother, who's only 2 years younger than me, said, I thought my youngest brother went to therapy for a short time. No, he went to 5 days a week with a psychiatrist for 2 years. And he came out, excuse me, but fucked up. I didn't know him. And he started hanging with people that were really, really negative. And deep down, I thought part of that I need to own that that's my fault. And at one point, I I felt like I created a monster. And I know I didn't, but I felt that. And I met with him one time on a family outing, and said to him, if you weren't my brother by blood, you wouldn't even be my friend. And that lingered in my heart, those hateful words, for many years. And about 4 months ago, I called him and made an amends with him, and he forgave me. He had the strength to forgive me. And I forgave myself, and we started communication. And within several weeks after that, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and got sepsis on top of that and almost died. And he was my first visit. When I got off the plane, before I got to my mother's house, I went and saw him in the hospital and got to spend time with him in the present. We let go of the past. We took that burden off our shoulders so that we could both be in the present, and that I could appreciate the time I have left with him and that he has left with me. And he knows he can call me 24/7. I want to be there and accompany him to his death. I've learned how to do that. My two best friends are both medicine men with a tribe here, and I work a lot with death. And I learned to appreciate it as my best friend, to be in the moment in my life, not knowing how many moments there'll be. I feel like I'm kind of rambling now. There's so much more I'd love to share from my heart, but I'm just appreciative for all of you and would love your feedback. And if the meeting goes longer, I've gone into several of these meetings and asked that they change the name from parking lot to campfire, because I'm used to people going out in parking lots and beating the hell out of each other, or people cheating on each other in relationships and meeting in parking lots. But I find it much more warming to go to a campfire where we share from our hearts. Thank you all.